Aloha, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your interest in heritage tourism, which I always, of course, figure is heritage, and in this case, as it relates to tourism. So, yes, I'm replacing Lynn today, and so I'm wearing Lynn's lei today, and I figured, hey, if I cannot pull off Lynn's lei, then I got no business standing up here anyway, right? So, sorry. Again, as was mentioned, FIJIANS Institute is a tour operator destination management company that has specialized in running heritage programs and environmental programs in Hawaii and throughout the rest of Polynesia, Melanesia, Micronesia for over 25 years now. Our mission is to, our mission is pretty much as you see up there. I'll address it a little bit more later, but it really is to expose the visitors to the side of the destination that they don't normally see when they visit on their own. This has been addressed in their sessions pretty well, but as Frank mentioned, Hawaii is a mature market. People are looking for something new, and in reality, of course, what's old is new. Heritage has always been here. It's all around us. It really is nothing new, but the reality is that the heritage experience that visitors usually get is pretty superficial. So there's lots of opportunity to go a lot deeper and to give them a richer experience. And this benefits not only the visitor, but it also benefits the community in some real tangible ways. Hawaii is an incredibly, incredibly rich destination. It's so fascinating here. I feel blessed that over these 25 years that I have had the opportunity to explore Hawaii from a lot of different angles. People come to us asking for tours focused on astronomy and archaeology and, of course, culture and marine life and spirituality and almost any topic you can name of. And then we have the honor of going out and looking into the community for experts on these resources, and they're there. They're always there. We never had a request that we couldn't fulfill. And, you know, I think much of Hawaii, again, as was mentioned earlier, we're busy at our jobs. We got to go shopping. We got to take our kids. You know, we got to go to their activities on the weekends. We don't have much time to really reflect on the heritage and everything that is around us in many cases. So it's new to the heritage tourist, and I think a lot of us, what's out there would surprise a lot of us who live here as well. So the way I should step back a moment and say there are a lot of kind of bird's eye view presentations that are going to be given at this forum, but the purpose of ours today is to give a little bit more where's the rubber meet the road type presentation. So my presentation is designed to talk about what Pacific Islands Institute does as a case study of one way that heritage tourism is being done. So the way we approach it is similar to what Ramsey said this morning. We begin with the community and the community values. And this could be here, it could be in Fiji, it could be in Samoa, it could be anywhere. What does the community value? What does the community want to share with the visitor? Who should share it? Where should it be shared? When should it be shared? How should it be shared? As Ramsey said, you know, maybe the best time to meet with the taro farmer is 7 a.m. You know, maybe it's not at 10 a.m. when it's comfortable because people didn't have to wake up too early. You know, the best time to go to a market in a lot of places is like 6 a.m. It's pretty uncomfortable, but that's the place to go. Fish market in Hawaii, right? If you're going to go there, you better be there early. So, and then, of course, the visitor has certain needs and desires, and there are logistics and practicalities that we have to consider as well. So really, we view everything, and we view our role as the facilitator between the product, which frankly is not us. It's everybody out in the audience. It's everybody out in the community who's doing interesting things related to their heritage, and the visitor, so that the conversation can take place between them. And then we just try to make sure that, you know, they can get there, that there's a bathroom stop along the way, that people can focus because they're not too hungry, you know, that they got a place to spend the night, and things like that. These are a few of the types of programs that we've offered in Hawaii. Astronomy programs, we were approached by Smithsonian to offer a program with their Harvard Smithsonian Chair of Astronomy, because of course Hawaii is well known for our astronomy observatories out here. So, but everything we do, I mean, heritage underlies it. Heritage has got to be there. It's got to be involved. So what we did was we took them to the Big Island and we involved the Ahapunanaleo school in Hilo and had the group go visit them in their canoe, the Hoku Walakai. And so they got to learn how the Hawaiian skies are being used in the perpetuation of Hawaiian culture. We had a group leader that had sailed aboard Hokule'a go along them. So they constantly had as their resource the cultural person and the Western astronomer. They went to the other side of the island and they got to speak to a navigator from the Makali'i, Kalepa Babayan. So culture in astronomy. National parks, we have programs that are focused on the national parks, and of course the national parks are really inherently heritage sites. We've got, of course, the Valor in the Pacific National Park. We've got all of the national parks along the west coast of the Big Island, Pu'ukohola, Pu'uhonua, Honaunau, places like that. So again, another way that we're delivering heritage programs. Hawaiian culture, we have a school that comes every year, one of the California schools that comes out on an alternative spring break program. And they come to Oahu. And they visit sites, of course they visit lo'i. And when you visit the lo'i, you know, it's not just the interactive getting in the lo'i thing, but you're learning about resource management, Hawaiian resource management. Go to Waimea, learn about Hawa'a, do some service while you're up there. Visiting with Hawaiian musicians in their home. So you get to see a home, you get to talk about the stories that are part of the songs. You get to feel the aloha hospitality. And in fact, we had a whole program that we did for Rhodes Scholar. Frank mentioned that as one of the organizations that's out there doing heritage tourism. We do a lot of work with them. We did a whole 2-week program, Wahamaui Kauai, focused on music as the overarching theme because, of course, and it's Hawaiian music specifically, because music is about people, it's about place, it's about history, culture, protocol. I mean, really kind of any theme that you would want to discuss can be discussed through music, as Aaron so eloquently showed us this morning. And actually, back in the day, Aaron was one of the guys that helped us out. He did a course on Hawaiian history through Hawaiian music for us back when he was getting his degree. And then we've also done heritage programs through art. Duke University and the National Museum of Art came out, and of course art again is all about heritage. So visiting the public art institutions here in Hawaii, as well as visiting a lot of people that have private collections. So connecting the visitor to Hawaii's special resources in a way that they couldn't do on their own or wouldn't be likely to do on their own. Some of the specific kinds of hands-on activities that we do are represented here. Gathering limu, cleaning it. Sometimes the limu is invasive, which is a nice bonus because then you're taking out an invasive species, but hey, you can eat it too. Awesome. Learning how to throw net, making laulau, pounding squid. How many visitors come pound squid in Hawaii? Not too many, right? Harvesting kalo, and of course, once you've done all that work with all those food items, you might as well have an imu as well. So getting involved in preparing the imu and activities such as that. A very hands-on way that people can get involved in heritage in Hawaii through voluntourism. So again, and excuse me if this is, I'm always kind of torn. I feel like because the lens we have that everybody already knows all this stuff, so hopefully not everybody already knows all of this. But you know, going out and helping rebuild fish ponds with Paipaio He'eia, reforesting and replanting native species and learning about the Hawaiian ecosystem and the cultural uses of the plants. This one here is up in Hakalau National Forest. So again, replanting up there helps bring back or support the native birds. And of course, we're all aware that the native birds were important in Hawaiian culture. Helping clear streams so native plants can thrive, and helping restore, rebuild, plant weed, etc., different lo'i that are out there. And oftentimes these things are done through nonprofit organizations as well. So besides visiting and besides the benefit that's being realized by the actual work that's being done, you're also supporting a nonprofit institution. And one of the underlying things that's very important to us in our programs is the mutuality of the visitor experience. It's got to be good for the visitor. It's got to be good for the local community. Everybody's got to pay bills. When's the last time you tried to pay a bill with Aloha? You get your phone bill. Hey, how about I just Aloha you instead of sending a check? And we're like, no, we need the check. So when you visit the location, there's always money. And if people say, you know what, no need money, then we say, can you designate a community institution where you'd like us to send something, because there has to be money as part of it. Okay, so the things I just described were on the tour operations side, but on the convention meetings and incentive side, some of these things can be done as well, although the scaling can get difficult if it's a huge convention. But some of the things that can be done to introduce more Hawaiian heritage, local heritage into the CMI market is encouraging groups that come to use local speakers instead of just bringing the ones from the mainland. Setting up experiences part of their meeting that they could really only have in Hawaii. So for example, sorry, just gotta check my note for a second here. Okay, I can pass on that one for now. Customized board meetings. The Smithsonian National Board came out recently and put together a program for them focused on various Smithsonian activities and the host culture around places like research on Coconut Island, the submillimeter array on Mauna Kea, again, National Forest, places like that. The National Parks Conservation Association had their board come out, putting together programs for them and really doing tight logistics so they can get around and see everything they need to see in the national parks. Another type of CMI heritage activity. Customized tours. The American Phytopathological Society came here. Plant disease people. I like to think of it as plant health too, the flip side of the coin. But obviously in Hawaii we have plants. And most of these guys came from the mainland and other places where their plants are different than ours. So we were able to put together programs for them that focused on Hawaiian environment, challenges of native plants and plant disease in the Hawaiian environment. And of course, we're well aware that the introduction of exotic plants to Hawaii has resulted in a lot of the diminishment of native species. So getting to talk to some of those challenges here, some of those things that can only be found in Hawaii. And then other things that can be done for that market include service projects. This is a group from General Electric helping out with USS Missouri, helping maintain the USS Missouri. Obviously a heritage site, given that the end of World War II in Japan, documents were signed aboard. And then you can do team building out in the Hawaiian environments. So yeah, at the end of the day, again, I feel very lucky about the position that we have to be able to experience Hawaii's rich heritage, to share it with visitors. We believe firmly that Hawaii has so much more to offer than just the hotel experience. We have some wonderful hotels, but really they got to get outside the hotel to experience Hawaii's rich heritage. And it's a lot of work in this to do this. It takes a lot of passion and drive and belief. But it's worth it. It's great for the visitor, and it's great for the community. Mahalo. So I'd like to introduce again Dr. John Fleckles. Dr. Fleckles will be sharing his experience of heritage tourism as it's delivered in Fiji. Give us something to think about what it's like on another Pacific island, and we'll see what we can maybe draw from that in Hawaii.
Thank you, Andrew. Mahalo. Mahalo and aloha this morning. Thanks for coming out to here. Andrew just gave you the macro, and now I'll give you a micro, okay? Let's look at a specific example of cultural tourism or heritage travel. And my title today is Encountering Living Traditions in Fiji. Encountering is the key word in cultural travel. It's not enough to lecture people or to have local people lecture them. The visitor should be given an opportunity to go out and encounter the culture, which of course happens, but often they don't know it just happened. So in a way, you have to guide them what to look for or what it is just occurred and talk about it. Most of my talk this morning, all of it will be about the Fiji Islands, and most of it will just be about encountering one living tradition because of limitations of time. And that living tradition is kava, the drinking of kava, which in Fiji is a ritual and it's a social activity. It's two things. And it's throughout the islands and throughout the culture, from government offices to museums. When you walk in, you buy a ticket, you give it to the doorman, and he gives you a cup of kava to swallow down. To visiting villages and people's homes. And even sometimes shops have a bowl by the front counter so you can have a little shot. We'll go into what kava is in a minute, don't worry. Okay. Bula, that's the Fijian greeting. My title today is Living Traditions, which are practices and values that bind that ethnic Fijian, not the entire of Fiji, because there are other ethnic groups there, but ethnic Fijians together in clan and village. And my answer to your question, what are cultural travelers looking for, is they're seeking encounters with living traditions. I've never had anybody in over 20 years say on one of these trips, well, that's not what I came to do. Through the marketing, they know what it's going to be. So I don't really face the question that you face about what it is that the traveler is looking for in a cultural experience. I can only tell you what happens when you've got one and what they go through. But one major point to make here is we're not talking about museums here. Fiji and the South Pacific Islands are not museums or cultural centers. Wherever we go out in the country, when we're outside Suva, the capital city, where there are museums, but when you're out in the country, you're looking at ethnic culture as it is practiced and can be experienced. So you can't just be an observer either. You, as the traveler, have got to interact. They expect that. They're not performers either. But once you get that two-way street going, it gets very interesting. So let's just have a little definition here. Travel does not just involve having a look. Cultural travel is more than that. It involves cultural encounters, but such encounters are only understood if one learns some basic ways in which that culture differs from your own. You can learn that along the way from your guide. That's okay. The other characteristic of my travelers is they never prepare beforehand. You give them a reading list, forget it. They don't. They get in it as you get in it on the travel. Then at the end of the trip, hey, can you give me some books? I'd like to pursue this farther. Sure, give you some references. So my purpose is to guide the traveler in understanding cultural encounters in the Pacific Islands. That's what I do. That's my responsibility. Okay, here's the map of the Pacific, and here's Fiji down here. 6 hours flight time from Honolulu. 3 hours from Auckland. Okay. Let's just say a few words about Fiji. It has 850,000 people, so it's smaller than the Hawaiian Islands. And of the people there, 55% are ethnic Fijian, and 38% are Indo-FIJIANS, who are the descendants of East India people who were brought in from 1875 to 1916 to work the sugar plantations, and who stayed and became the commercial, business, and largely the professional classes of the Fiji Islands. But in recent political challenges, they have left in large numbers. It used to be 50-50 almost in the population division. The Indo-Fijian population is now down to 38%. Notice I do not say Indian. They are not Indian. They are Indo-Fijian. They've been there for generations. They didn't just arrive. The last came in 1916. That's a long time ago, 100 years ago. The major islands, most of the population lives on two major islands, LEVU and VANUA. VANU and other islands are the Lao group, Taveuni. I won't go into them today. The economy is dependent on sugar. Yes, they still are dependent on sugar. They just harvested their largest sugar crop in the history of Fiji just a couple of weeks ago. It's now going to the mill. Their sugar is subsidized by the European community, and so that helps them survive. Very little of it would ever found its way to your table. The other major industry, of course, is tourism, and copra, which is dried coconut meat, is making a comeback because coconut oils now are in demand. Fiji Water, established by an American entrepreneur from Los Angeles, is thriving all over the place. And gold. Fiji has large gold mines, and now it has bauxite mines that the Chinese are developing. Here's a map of Fiji. I just want to point out that most people come in at the airport at Nandi down here, LEVU. The capital city is Suva, but my travels with my groups are mainly around the town, small town, about 10,000 people of SAVUSAVU here on VANUA level. That's where we spend most of our time. And it's much more like being out in country Fiji. Okay, 38% Indo-Fijians. The little boy on the left is selling peanuts at the bus stop. He is an Indian entrepreneur. He should be in school, and he's not. Instead, he's selling peanuts for 20 cents, and he has this little fanny pack cash register there. On the right side are Fijian boys, all brothers in a village, who have nothing to do. They're unemployed, and except when they work out in the subsistent fields or growing taro for sale in town. Ethnic Fijians are in between people. They're partly Melanesian and partly Polynesian. So they're just Fijians. Fijians are unique. The cultural border between Melanesia and Polynesia goes right through Fiji. Western Fiji is Melanesian. Eastern Fiji is very close to the culture of Tonga because it's close to Tonga. Okay, let's take a moment with this slide because this is the setting for our trips. When we leave our little resort, little because it only handles about 100 people, we take our bus and go to villages like this and spend the day. These villages are perfectly set up for such visits, with their village green in the center and the houses grouped around the village green. Everybody has land, all the clans have land, but the land is in the distance. You see on the hillside, the cultivation of kava on the steep hillside that would belong to certain clans in the village here. There's the church at the head of the village, showing that religion has a very, very prominent place in their culture. It's simply unheard of not to be a churchgoer there. That's one of the first cultural things you run into. John, you'll be coming to church with your group, right? Oh, yes, right. Okay, in front is a temporary shed where the kava drinking has been set up and where the elders will be sitting around to greet us, and we'll all drink kava together after we visited with families. There's on the extreme right, there's a little piece of the volleyball net, and on the extreme left, you see the television aerial on top of the little house. So they get a little, about 2 or 3 hours of television a day. The assumption behind, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have moved that fast. Can I go back this way? Yes. Okay. The setup in Fiji Islands is unique, largely in the Pacific, in the sense that the British colonials preserved the indigenous Fijian institutions. When they took over in 1874 and ruled until 1970, Fiji Islands have been independent since 1970. Fiji, under British rule, and for many years after independence, was ruled through chiefs, the heads of clans, the heads of provinces. And the clans retain to this day, in the Constitution of Independent Fiji, ownership and control of the land. 83% of the land of Fiji is owned by ethnic Fijian clans, period. That 17% was already lost by 1874 and was not taken away from the early sugar planters. But after that, nobody else, not an Indo-Fijian or a European or an American or Australian, could have that land. It's leased, certainly, for sugar plantations, but it's not owned. Most Fijians still live in villages apart from other ethnic groups. So there's very little opportunity in this culture for the intermixing and the living together and the learning from each other of different ethnic groups, though it's getting better and better all the time, much better than it used to be. So what is behind this indigenous land control? It's largely an assumption that the early British colonials shared. Without the land, the culture would die. And the early British rulers wanted to preserve the ethnic Fijian culture because indigenous oceanic cultures have a deep psychological and spiritual attachment to the land. Note that clan control of land through chiefs exists throughout Oceania, particularly Samoa and Tonga, which are similar to Fiji, but not in Hawaii, of course, and not in French Polynesia. So the Fijians and the Indo-Fijians live is a great deal apart from each other. This is expressed in sports. The Fijians get really excited about and follow very closely rugby, which they are world champions in. The Indo-Fijians come out for soccer games. That's their preferred sport. But today the two communities are coming together. Fijians eat curry and Indians drink coffee. And today, right now, last month, it's the beginning of a whole new era in the Fiji Islands. September 2014, elections set up a new parliamentary democracy. The military dictatorship has ended. Secondly, the law has been passed. We are all Fijian. There's no longer any legal distinction between Indo-Fijians and Fijians. However, the Itakai, that is the indigenous Fijians, still retain ownership and control of the land. That's in the Constitution. Will that work? We'll see. Stay tuned. Now, there are lots of examples of, how am I doing? Oh, yeah, see, I already. Okay, so I'm only going to give one example today. I don't have time to go into the others, but I can list some of the prominent ones. The living traditions, there's a great deal of emphasis on communal values versus individualist values. In our culture. Just take the case of land. If it's owned by the clan, how are you going to get any? You get through your clan membership, and you apply for it. And if you're married, have a wife, and you're expecting children, you will be allotted a certain amount of land for subsistence. Or when the sugar plantation leases it, and the revenues come in, as a member of the clan that lives in the village where the land is, you have a right to a certain little bit of that revenue. But as an individual Fijian, you don't strike out on your own and, well, I'm going to go farming, you know, I'm going to grow corn or whatever. No, you don't do that. Hierarchy is another one. There's still a great deal of deference shown to chiefs. That still works. Protocol is one of the most important things. Fijians, when you get close to them, will tell you, if you ask them, how things going here when you come for a village visit. You'll often get the reply, things are done properly here. When I first heard that, I thought, well, that's kind of odd. Is everybody well and happy? That's not what they were emphasizing. They were emphasizing they're following proper protocol in this village. So they were okay. Oh, okay. The traveler can encounter these values if they know where to look. And that's the guide's job to show, point out, or afterwards have them talk about what just happened. What did you see? An easy example. I got the travelers here and I've got the village people here, and there's always a block. Okay, everybody talk. Nothing happens. A traveler will ask someone from the village, well, you know, how's it going? Or whatever. Or what do you do for a living? Not much of an answer, and then silence. So I clue them, yeah, but ask one question. How many children do you have? Oh, they'll start. Oh, family. Oh, yeah, let me tell you about my family. And what about your family? And before you know it, they're off and running. The traveler needs to understand and also accept differences from their own values and practices for this to work. It doesn't do any good to say to Fijians, you should be more individualistic. You should be more competitive. They're in a context where they just really are limited to what they can do about that. You're kidding, 3 minutes, how does the time go? Okay, I better move on. The setting for our cultural encounters is DAKU Resort, which reflects those three Fijian values of community, hierarchy, and protocol. It was set up to do that in the early 70s. For instance, an example, it reflects chiefly traditions. Here's a picture of Shunia, who is the spokesman for the chief, who speaks to the common people for the chief. The chief never addresses common people directly, and therefore his title is Matani VANUA, and he was a great cultural guide for years. I learned much from him. The example of kava, it is a ritual and social practice. When we arrive, we have a formal kava drinking ceremony in which we are welcomed, and the people there are then given an apology for all the protocol they may break while we're there. And then they also forgive us for all the protocol we may break. So you're okay ahead of time. Kava is a muscle relaxant, very powerful. It comes from a type of pepper plant, not the pepper the black pepper comes from, but it has a slight peppery flavor. It also numbs your mouth. It also does taste like dirty river water. And it's used both in the ritual of welcome, of including the visitor into the village or into the home, as well as socially, like we drink coffee or alcoholic drinks or whatever. Yeah. There's a kava bowl, which has a symbolic meaning, no time to go into now. That's part of the ritual greeting when we visit DAKU and the preparation of the kava. When we visit a village, we're expected to bring a gift of called a SAVUSAVU of kava, which we buy in the local market. And then we hear our Matani VANUA Kenny, presents it to the village, who are all in this hall. And there's a picture of the chief of the village with a flower in his hair. He stays in the background along with the elders. They say nothing. If you go talk to them, that's okay, but they don't have any role other than to observe. It's the Matani Vanuas that do the talking. The kava root is pounded into a powder. The powder is mixed with water, stirred up. The first drink goes to our Matani Vanua, who downs it, and that's their Matani Vanua with the yellow shirt, getting ready to clap 3 times like this when Kenny swallows it all at once. And then he's offering it to my visitors, my fellow travelers who would like some, raise your hand, that kind of thing. There are also highly ritual ceremonies in SAVUSAVU. This one for the Tui Thakamdrovi, who is the high chief of the province, where they go through much more ritual in presenting the visiting high chief with a gift of kava. I wish I had time to tell you the story of Reverend Breaker. Let's just say he was the last cannibal victim because he broke the taboo, never touch a chief on the top of the head. And what Reverend Baker did one day when the chiefs from the hills came down to coastal Viti LEVU, they were at the church, and he reached over, oh, chief, I like your head comb. Took it right off. Said, oh, it's like it. Can I keep that? And I said, sure, Reverend, no problem. And the Reverend then went home, and then he was never seen until years later. And bits of his boots were found there because they tried to eat those too, whatever. It's in this museum at Suva if you don't believe me. Okay. Do not underestimate the Fijian warrior tradition. They have the largest standing army in the Pacific. They have a role in UN peacekeeping in the Middle East. And the military are ready to intervene for political order at any time. They've already done it in 1987, 2000, 2006, 2009, etc. Conclusion, there are 2 challenges that are undermining the survival of these wonderful Fijian cultural values. One is 50% of the population is under 18. There's nothing for them to do in villages. They're flocking into towns and cities. Second is, are the chiefs compatible with democracy? I'd like to end with a quote from Prime Minister Bainimarama, who was the military dictator up until September and is now the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister said politicians should not mislead people by mixing up the Great Council of Chiefs, which he had abolished, with our chiefs. The Great Council of Chiefs was abolished because it had become political. The chiefs remained with their chiefly status intact, looking after their people and the Vanua, the land. That's the word for land. Okay. Vanaka, which is thank you, and Mothe is goodbye. The end.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Andrew or John? Please, can you come to the microphone? Thank you.
I wanted to spend just a quick moment on this concept of only in Hawaii experiences. And what does that really mean? Because we were just before this, I was in another breakout session on concierge. And when people come to the concierge and they want a local, authentic Hawaiian experience, so when you say only in Hawaii, what do you really mean? Because, I can travel the world and see temples, old temples, and I can see old temples here. I can bird watch wherever I go, and I can bird watch here. So what is it we're really trying to say? And I think it comes back to you encountering the living tradition. So is only in Hawaii experience really what you're trying to say, Dr. Fleckles, which is really only in Hawaii is really the people of Hawaii. So if you could comment on that.
Yes, I mean, in effect, Hawaiian culture, Hawaiian practices, protocols, etc., although they are spread other places around the world, truly in context are found only in Hawaii. So if the focus is on the host culture, or even the blending of peoples that have happened here and the way that it's happened here, those are the kinds of experiences that are only in Hawaii, or at least rare enough in other parts of the world that, in effect, they're only in Hawaii. So that's what I'm referring to.
I would say that it's a matter of degree throughout Oceania. You have in different places, they have different degrees of retention of the old values and practices of the indigenous people, the indigenous islanders. In some places, it's been largely wiped out. In other places, it's being restored, such as Rapa Nui, Easter Island. In Fiji, I think it's in a process of decline, of decay, of being lost. However, the visits to Fiji are specifically to ethnic Fijian communities. So it's not all of Fiji. Like the Indo-FIJIANS, they might be another trip to be developed in the future. So throughout Oceania, you have strong cultural similarities. The Hawaiian culture is related to Maori of New Zealand, very close, and to others throughout, for instance. But it's a matter of degree, what you're going to find.
Andrew, I have a question for you. For the need to have visitors because it's such a driver of our economy, how do you balance the need for increased volume, potential increased volume, with the stress that it applies to those heritage sites to make sure that they remain authentic and cared for, the stewardship?
Tricky question. I have to look at it from my perspective as a tour operator at DMC, right? So the site itself has to be clear on its mission and goals and priorities and what it hopes to gain from interaction with visitors, or it may be on an experimental basis. Hey, let's try this. I don't know. It sounds like it might work. It's really up to them to decide where the balance is for their individual site. But I would say, as a practical matter from our side, what we do is we make sure that we have a variety of experiences available in the toolkit. And so if one place is not available at a given time, or if they need to rotate out a little bit because they're getting too busy, then we just insert another aspect of the cultural experience that the client is looking for and that the community wants to share in another location.
Thank you. I know we're up against some time, but if you can just bear with me for a minute. I have one more question for Dr. Fleckles, or John. You mentioned these encounters through living traditions. The question I had was, you mentioned as you walked into these Fijian villages, you would go to church, they would consider that an authentic experience. Where do you draw the line? Is because it's a living tradition, is that an authentic experience? Are there any other forms of worship that you would talk to your clients or your guests about?
That's a tough one. What I really meant by the church going was an assumption on their part that we were all solid church goers. And if someone said they didn't do that, and that was just mind-boggling. What do you mean you don't do that? It's just mind-boggling. It was just, so that's where the confrontation was. The churches can come, they're different, they're Catholic, Methodist mostly, but now they're evangelical, they're Mormon, and that. But once you're in the Indo-Fijian community, then you're in a different context. The Indo-Fijians do not expect you, let alone to go or even understand their temples. They are Hindu. They still remain Hindu today, with a small number, about 5%, being Muslim. We've visited Muslim mosques and just been shown around. The ones in Fiji are very, very simple. But we visited Hindu temples and been absolutely perplexed. There was nobody there that could begin to explain what it was that we were looking at, nor really cared very much unless we paid some money. So it was a very, very totally different kind of experience. So my answer is yes, you could have different religious experiences in Fiji. You could visit the Hindu temples, the Muslim mosques, and then the different Christian churches. But the main point was, in terms of Fijian culture, there's just an unspoken assumption, well, of course you're all churchgoers. Which one are you?
That's really interesting because it brings us back full circle to what Ramsey Tom was saying this morning with this place-based theory. You have your place, you have your host, and you have your guest. And the question is, the first question should be, after you figure and you serve yourself and your place and your culture and your people, what do you want to serve to the guest? How should you serve your guest? So interesting, a lot of opportunities for people to present their culture in the way that they want to present it. So thank you all for humoring me. I appreciate it. We're up against the clock. It is lunchtime, which is in room 311, just around the corner. Thank you, folks, and have a great day.